risked treacherous voyages across oceans and around continents, all to avoid the Ottomans. From China to Mexico, the Ottoman Empire shaped the known world at the turn of the 16th century. Given its hegemony, it became locked in military, ideological, and economic competition with the Spanish and Italian states, Russia, India, and China, as well as other Muslim powers. The Ottomans influenced in one way or another nearly every major event of those years, with reverberations down to our own time. Dozens of familiar figures, such as Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Montezuma, the reformer Luther, the warlord Tamerlane, and generations of popes, as well as millions of other greater and lesser historical personages, calibrated their actions and defined their very existence in reaction to the reach and grasp of Ottoman power. The challenge of the Ottoman brand of Islam, as the empire pushed westward into Europe, was a major impetus behind Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation. On the empire's eastern border, its wars with Safavid Iran intensified the divide between Sunni and Shiite that roils the Muslim world even today. Ottoman military conquests and economic acumen created one of the world's first truly global commodities, coffee, and spurred capitalist consumerism through their invention of the coffeehouse. Europe's forced departure, more like ejection, from the Mediterranean contributed to an apocalyptic mindset in Christian Europe. Christianity and Islam seemed to be battling for the body and soul of creation. Once in the New World, self-styled soldiers of Christ continued their old war, waging it now against the indigenous peoples of a distant land. These Moor-slayers used their experiences of Islam in the Old World to understand the Americas and their peoples, and even, with the spiritual and legal backing of the Pope, invoked their perceived duty to counter Islam to justify their importation of West African slaves to the Americas. By ignoring Islam, we have thus failed to understand Columbus and his age fully, and indeed correctly. In tracing the global influence of Ottoman power, God's Shadow offers an innovative, even revolutionary account of the role of Islam and the Ottoman Empire in defining the shape of the Old and New Worlds. Over the past 5 centuries, the bulk of this story has been dismissed or ignored by professional historians and lay readers alike. Yet Muslims were integral to what is inevitably a shared history. The ineluctable fact is that the Ottoman Empire made our modern world, which is admittedly a bitter pill for many in the West. Why is this so? A primary reason is that in the 21st century West, as indeed in 15th and 16th century Europe, Muslims are often seen reflexively as enemies and terrorists, diametrically opposed to the religion that defined our culture and to the political systems we hold sacred. From popular culture to global politics, among conservatives and liberals alike, Islam, in the United States especially, is seen as the great other, a problem that somehow needs to be fixed. Muslims are targets of both popular and official vilification, and often outright physical violence. Other facts, too, have blotted out our recognition of the Ottoman influence on our own history. Foremost, we tend to read the history of the last half-millennium as the rise of the West. This anachronism rings as true in Turkey and the rest of the Middle East as it does in Europe and America. In fact, in 1500, and even in 1600, there was no such thing as the now much vaunted notion of the West. Throughout the early modern centuries, the European continent consisted of a fragile collection of disparate kingdoms and small, weak principalities locked in constant warfare. The large land-based empires of Eurasia were the dominant powers of the Old World, and apart from a few European outposts in and around the Caribbean, the Americas remained the vast domain of its indigenous peoples. The Ottoman Empire held more territory in Europe than did most European-based states. In 1600,